Fellas, Tommy Dorsey's band is going to do another tune and a shake. Meantime, we're buzzing Johnny Santos and the gang at 867, and Kansas Bill Wilmshire and colleagues at 953. How's everybody at 617, including Corporal Carl Carpenter, no relation to our boy Ken Carpenter, and what's with Private Lawrence Weinman and the mobile medical outfit at 251? Guess you and the Tommies are working on that new project by now. Howdy, Spina, McCormick, Ratcliffe, and McCallion at 29. Regards from Bing and Ann Sheridan to Reuben Kirsch at 634. Second Louis John Buffington in Southwest Alaska. Stay contented there, lad. Newark is waiting for you. Love to Stump, Burrow, Tex, and Tinkers at AP041. Ditto to Deacon Cohen, Harpo Fitzpatrick, Commando Fortune, Pollock, Dutch Jungle, Sweet, and the dirty first section of Battery V at 27. Double ditto to Marconi, Bell, and Edison and the Walkie Squawky crew. And now the good word to all of you outside the USA is, let's get inside Benchley for one of his incomparable bedtime stories. Applause and play on for Robert Benchley.
Thank you, Miss Shaw. This is going to be a ghost story. And for the purposes of its telling, I shall assume the voices of several characters, fooling no one, and making it more embarrassing for everyone. Tell us a ghost story, Uncle Edith, cried all the children late Christmas afternoon when everyone was cross and sweaty. Very well, then, said Uncle Edith. This isn't much of a ghost story, but if I hear any whispering while it's going on, I will seize the luckless offender and break his arm. Well, to begin, my father was a poor wood chopper, and we lived in a charcoal burner's hut in the middle of a large, dark forest. That's the beginning of a fairy story, you big sap, cried little Dolly. Little Dolly was a fat, disagreeable child who never should have been born. What we wanted was a ghost story. To be sure, cried Uncle Edith. What a stupid old whoopid I was. The ghost story begins as follows. It was late in November when my friend Warrington came up to me in the club one night and said, Craig, old man, I want you to come down to my place in Whoopshire for the weekend. There's greffel shooting to be done and grouse no end. What do you say? Well, I've been working hard that week and the prospect pleased. So it was that the 340 out of Charing Cross found Warrington and me on our way to Whoopshire, loaded down with guns, plenty of flints, and two of the most beautiful snootfuls ever accumulated in Merry England. It was getting dark when we reached Breaming Downs. And as we drove up the shadowy path to the door, I felt Warrington's hand on my knee. Cut that out, I said. Look, he said, there's a shadow against the pane in the guest room window. Well, what of it, I asked. It was my turn to look astonished. Warrington lowered his voice. Whenever there is a shadow against the window pane as I drive up with a guest, that guest is found dead in bed the next morning, dead from fright, he added significantly. I looked up at the window toward which he was pointing. There, silhouetted against the glass, was the shadow of a gigantic man. I say man, it was more the figure of a large weasel. Except for a fringe of dark red clappers that were suspended from his beak. How do you know they were dark red? Asked little Tom Kit. If it was the only shadow that you saw. You shut your trap, said Uncle Edith. I could hardly control my astonishment at the sight of this thing. It was so astonishing. Well, I said, I'm going up and beard Mr. Ghost in his den. So up the dark winding stairway we went into the resounding corridors of the old 17th century house, pausing only when we came to the door of what was to be my room. I knocked. There was a piercing scream from within as we pushed the door open. But when we entered, we found the room empty, completely empty. Well, I guess it was nothing, said Warrington cheerfully. Perhaps the wind and the trees. But the shadow on the pane, I asked. He pointed to a fancily carved piece of guest soap on the washstand. The light was behind that, he said. And from the outside, it looked like a man. To be sure, I said. But I could see that Warrington was white as a sheet. Is there anything that you need, he asked. Breakfast is at 9, if you're lucky, he added jokingly. I think I have everything, I said. I'll do a little reading before I go to sleep, and perhaps count my laundry. How many people have died of fright in this room, I asked, thumbing through the pages of Town and Country. 7 in all, he said. I wonder if I might have a glass of hot water with my breakfast, I said. It warms your stomach. Doesn't it, though, he agreed. And was gone. I have to go to the bathroom, said little Roger, age 6. Well, go ahead, said Uncle Edith. You know where it is. I don't want to go alone, whined Roger. Go with Roger, Arthur, commanded Uncle Edith. And whatever was the horrible thing in your room, Uncle Edith? Asked all the children in unison when Roger and Arthur had left the room. I can't tell you that, replied Uncle Edith, for I packed my bag and got the 940 back to town. That is the lousiest ghost story I ever heard, said Peterkin. I'm glad you liked it, replied Uncle Edith, giving him a hot foot. So that is my ghost story. Next week, a story for just the boys, shall we?